Today's shiur begins 16 lines from the top of Daf Yud Gimel. You'll see a quote from the Mishnah. The Mishnah had contained a number of words that were associated with sacrifices. Ke'imra, Kedirim. The literal meanings of the words are not of absolute importance. Imra means sheep, but it's a reference to the sheep that would be offered as the daily sacrifice in the Beis HaMikdash. Dirim is a reference to the sheep corrals or pens that held those animals, or the storage rooms of the wood that was offered on the altar. Now the Gemara. Tana. Imra, li'imra, ki'imra. If a person says that which I will give you is imra, or le'imra, ki'imra, we've seen that the lamed before the word many times can be low as well, but each case has to be judged on its own. This brisa you'll see toward the end concludes in all of these cases, if he says she'ocheloch, so then it is also, it's binding. So you have to imagine, as you see each word, it's going to follow with the expression of she'ocheloch. For example, imra she'ocheloch. That which I give you is imra, is a tomid, is a korban. So if you're saying that which I would give you is a korban, that means that which I'm providing to you is Ozer. Or if you explain Shochaloch means that which I eat from you shall be unto me as an imra, as a sheep, which is a korban. So I'm in effect saying that I'm forbidding myself from benefiting from your food as if it were a korban. And the same applies to all of these words. So we continue in the source. Dirim, ledirim, kedirim. Dirim meaning a pen where the sheep were stored, the sacrificial animals were stored, or the wood to be offered on the mizbeach was stored. Also an item that was made Ozer through your imposing upon it restriction. Eitzim, li-eitzim, ke-eitzim, eitzim being the wood. Ishim, li-ishim, ke-ishim, ishim is a reference to that which is offered on the fire of the mizbeach. Mizbeach, la mizbeach, ki mizbeach. Heichal, leheichal, keheichal. Heichal is the enclosed portion of the Beis HaMikdash. Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, Kiyushalayim. Kulon, any of these expressions, she'oicheloch Ozer. Rashi, a little less than halfway down, Kulon she'oicheloch Ozer. T'chi omar, ki'imra she'oicheloch. If one says that, then domi keman de omar, it's as if he's saying, Ye'oser olai, Ma she'oicheloch. I am forbidding upon myself that which I would eat from you. Avol omar ki imra lo ocheloch. Notice this is in the negative. Instead of kimra ocheloch, it's kimra lo ocheloch mutter. The mashma, because that would imply avol im ocheloch, if I will eat from you, lo yehe kimra. It will not be like the sacrifice umutter, and therefore it would be allowed. Now we continue in the Gemara. Man shaminon lei delo shoni lei imra limra kimra. Who is the Tana that makes no distinction in these words? Namely, the prefix presence or lack thereof is of no distinction. In any of these cases, if he says she'oichel loch, it will be Ozer. Who is the Tana that holds that? Rebbe Meir he. You'll notice we have a new marking on the side under the Mivneh, heading the structural note. We indicate this is Havlotas Rebbe Meir, K'dei laharos hakusha mutoren Ozer. We want to highlight a question that we are just now starting, and this marking will help. So Rebbe Meir is the one that would make no distinction. Rashi, Rebbe Meir he,
The polygolate Rabbi Yehuda, who argues with Rabbi Yehuda. Di Rabbi Yehuda les le imra. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, would not acknowledge the expression imra, the word without a prefix to it, as having any vowel significance. Jomar, he's on record as having said, we've learned this before, Yerushalayim lo amar klum. If you say Yerushalayim without saying Ki Yerushalayim, so you've said nothing. So therefore, this Tanaic source that has no name to it must be Rebbe Meir. As, just to repeat ourselves, it says, Imra she'echalach is binding. Ema seifa. And here we have a long question. Continue reading the source, and then what do you see in the seifa? The kulan, any of these expressions, loy oichelach mutter. If you say any of these expressions and follow it by the term or the phrase lo ochelach, then there's no vow. V'hotanan, but do we not have in the next Mishnah the following? Le korban lo ochelach, Rebbe Meir Ozer. And notice the markings. A moment ago, we said that the source was authored by Rebbe Meir. And here we have the Seifa of that source authored by Rebbe Meir saying Lo Ochelach Mutter. Now we have the next Mishnah. Notice the dashed underlining, where you also have a Lo Ochelach phrase and Rebbe Meir holding Ozer. It is binding. V'yomar Rabbi Abba, and Rabbi Abba explains why it's binding. Naaseh ka'omer, when a person says L'korban lo ochelach, it is as if the person is saying, L'korban yehei lefikach lo ochelach. I am declaring that which you have as a korban, and therefore I cannot eat from what you have. So how do we resolve the seeming contradiction within Rebbe Meir? Lo kashya. There is no distinct. There is no contradiction. Ha damar loi imra. Ha diamar li imra. The conclusion of the source that said the brisa that we saw that said mutter is where he said lo imra lo ochelach. However, if he says le imra with a lamed alone, not as a separate word lo, but the le imra lo ochelach, that is where Rabbi Abba's explanation is relevant. And as Rabbi Abba said, if a person would say le korban lo ochelach, it's as if he's saying le korban yehei lefikoch lo ochelach. The Mishnah. On the side we have a topic heading in Osei, and we feature here two vow possibilities. Korban she'ochelach, lo korban lo ochelach. So the first presents matters in we'll say in the positive. Korban she'ochelach. The second phrase is there's a negative. Lo korban lo ochelach. We continue now in the Mishnah. Oimer, korban. We have a colon here because the person isn't actually saying korban, but he's saying oila, mincha, chatos, toida, shlomim. All of these are names of different sacrifices. She'ani ochelach. In other words, he says oila yehei she'ochelach, which is tantamount to saying that which I would be eating from you shall be unto me like an oila, or unto me like a mincha, or a chata. See, these are all sacrifices, and hence he's saying that, and the sacrifice, of course, is prohibited to benefit from. So, if you're saying that your food is unto me like a sacrifice, it's like something dedicated to the altar, I can't eat from it. It's Ozer. Rabbi Yehuda matir. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't Rabbi Yehuda doesn't agree that these are expressions that are binding because he doesn't use the prefix, the chof. He doesn't say ke'ola or ke'mincha.
We've explained this in the past, of course, but the chaf is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is essentially you're saying that that which I eat from you will be unto me like an olah. If you don't say like an olah, rather you say it is an olah, so according to Rabbi Yehuda, that has no meaning. More expressions. Ha-korban, ki-korban, korban, she'ocheloch, Ozer. Le-korban, lo-ocheloch, Rabbi Meir, Ozer. A number of these points we've seen in the past. Kotoning, it says in this Mishnah, Ha-korban, ki-korban, korban, she'ocheloch, Ozer. Stamo tano ki Rabbi Meir, the unnamed section of the Mishnah, the opening of the Mishnah. I should say let me retract that. This unnamed section of the Mishnah, the middle of the Mishnah, korban, kid korban, korban shochalach, and its binding, that works out to be like Rebbe Meir. Stamo means an unnamed section of the Mishnah. So you have this unnamed section working out like Rebbe Meir, where delo shoni lebein imra leimra, who makes no distinction whether you use the basic word without a prefix or the word with a prefix. This is, of course, Rabbi Meir in contrast to Rabbi Yehuda that we already emphasized before, says that if you don't have the prefix letter, it does not constitute a vow. The Gemara continues, Rabbi Meir, and the use of this house marking is similar to the way we used the diamond marking before in order to enable us to highlight the question that's coming up. So if the Mishnah is Rebbe Meir, Ha dekotani, the Mishnah continues by saying, and of course we can have an arrow here to show where this quote is coming from. It said in the Mishnah, Ha korban, and a couple other possibilities, using the phrase she'oichelach Ozer. Such a vow would be binding. So far, we're saying that is Rebbe Meir, because we're saying that our Mishnah is authored by Rebbe Meir. But do we not have a brisa that reads as follows? Moidim chachomim Rebbe Yehuda. And the expression Moidim chachomim is really a reference to Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Meir concedes to Rebbe Yehuda b'oimer, where a person says ha korban, and there are a few other expressions, but if you just focus on the dashed underlining, you'll see if a person says ha korban and next line she'oichelach, the result is mutter. And compare this with what we've said in our Mishnah, you see a contradiction. So let's read the Bryce again, where the Chachamim moeded to Rabbi Yehuda, and the Chachamim is Rabbi Meir is saying, B'omer ha korban, v'ha oila, v'ha mincha, v'ha chatos, she'oichelach, shemuter, shelo nodar ze'elo b'chayei korban. By saying ha korban, it's as if he's saying, I am vowing in the life of the sacrifice. It's a meaningless expression, in the life of the sacrifice. Therefore, there's no vow. So I hope that with the markings you can focus on the problem. On the one hand, our Mishnah, which is associated with Rebbe Meir, is saying ha korban she'ochelach is Ozer. We have a brisa in which Rebbe Meir is saying ha korban she'ochelach is not binding. The Gemara answers. We turn to the top of Omid Beis, Loi Kasha. There is no contradiction, and you might have guessed this even before we get to the answer. Ha diamar ha korban, v'ha diamar ha korban. Is it a separate word, namely ha, hey aleph ha korban? That's what the Brisa was talking about, that it's mutter, because ha korban is mashma, implies in the life of the sacrifice. And the Mishnah, which says that it is binding, is where he says ha korban, the hey as a prefix to the word korban. Now, my taima, why is it that in the Brisa, if you say ha korban, there is no vow? Chaye korban ka'omar. It's as if he's saying in the life of the sacrifice, which is a meaningless expression. Katani, it was taught lekorban lo ocheloch Rabbi Meir Ozer. The understanding right now of this, and this is, we've seen already a number of times, but we see it. We have to explain it again, though, for those who might not have seen it previously. By saying lo korban lo ochel, the thinking right now is that it's as if he's saying the lamed being understood as the word lo, not a korban. I will not be eating from you, so that which I will be eating from you shall be like a korban. And Rabbi Meir is reported here as saying that this is binding. But the Holesle the Rabbi Meir Michlal Lavat Shemehe, but Rabbi Meir doesn't hold by inference as a means of reaching conclusions. The only way to take this phrase, at least I say the only way at this point, the only way to take this phrase of La Korban Lo Ocheloch and have it sound like a vow is by drawing the inference from it. The phrase itself means that which I won't be eating from you is not like a korban, but that which I will be eating from you is unto me like a korban. How can Rabbi Meir say that that's a binding vow when, in order to come to the implication of prohibition, you have to rely on inference, reasoning? The Gemara answers, Omer Rabbi Abba, Nase k'omer lekorban yehei lefikach lo ochelach. Since the word appears as lekorban and not lo korban, there is room to understand it like Rabbi Abba does, and it means as a korban shall be that which I would be eating from you, and therefore I cannot eat your food. The Mishnah. Ha'omer lechavero koinum pi midaber imach. Yodi oisa imach, ragli ma'alechas imach aser. Person says to his friend, konam, my mouth. Konam is a kinui. We saw this at the beginning of the Masechta. It's an alternative expression referring to a sacrifice. So it's like saying my mouth is like a sacrifice with regard to conversing with you, and my hands are like a koinom with regard to helping you, to actions done for you. And my feet are prohibited like a korban with regard to walking together with you. And the Mishnah says that these are binding vows. Virominu, we raise a contradiction to the Mishnah from another source, a Mishnah later on. You should point out that we have a brackets. I should let me just be a little more accurate. We're quoting now a Tanaic source. On the side, there's a reference that this source is from a Tosefta in the first parak of Maseches Shavuos. So the first part of the source, you'll notice, is bracketed. The reason for the brackets is that the problem is found in the second part of this source. We're raising the source as a contradiction to the Mishnah. So first we'll skip the bracketed section and we'll read the text of the source. V'choymer b'shvuos shashvuos chalois al dover sheyesh boi mamish v'she'ein boi mamish ma she'ein kein b'nedarim. Shvuos have a stringency that is not found in the realm of Nedarim. Shvuos being translated possibly as oaths versus Nedarim, which we translate as vows, different types of restrictive speech. The strength of a shvuah is that it can be articulated regarding matters that are non non-physical, non-tangible or corporeal, like actions, as opposed to vows. Vows are object-related. Now, is it not so that in our Mishnah the person is trying to impose by way of vow, speech and working and walking? Those are all actions. How can a vow be effective regarding things that are actions? Our Mishnah doesn't speak about a shvua. Only in the realm of a shvua does it take hold. That is essentially the question. We'll now go over the entire source. The first part of the source, though, is, let's say, not the focus of our discussion. V'raminu, we raise as a challenge to the Mishnah. If you like, you can glance at the side. We have a topic heading for this section. Even though we've already explained it, let's read what we have on the side. HaGemara Masbira. How is it possible to prohibit speech or walking through a neder, through a vow, when we know as a principle that nedarim, vows do not take effect on matters that are not of substance, of physical substance, as is an object, for example. The Gemara continues. There are two principles: chomer b'shvuos mi'nedarim, u'b'nedarim mi'b'shvuos. There is a realm of stringency within shvuos that you don't find by nedarim, and the realm of nedarim has a stringency that you don't find by shvuos. Chomer b'nedarim, shanedarim cholim al hamitzvah kibirishus ma she'en kain b'shvuos. Within the realm of nedarim, there is a possibility of imposing a prohibition, which would prevent a person from performing a mitzvah. Now, we're not going to give a very specific or detailed example of that. That's for the Gemara to do in another section, not right now. But suffice it to say that in the realm of nedarim, a person could end up experiencing, we'll say, a restriction from doing a mitzvah. In other words, if he were to do the mitzvah, he'll be in violation of the neder. Just like nedarim are applicable to the realm of things that are totally optional, non-mitzvah items. Ma she'en kain b'shvuos. In the realm of shvuos, if a person were to, let us say, be nishba, he'll take a shvua not to mekayim a certain mitzvah. And then he goes ahead and is mekayim the mitzvah. Is he in violation of his shvua? No, he's not in violation of his shvua. Why not? Because he's mushba v'yoymed meharsina v'ein shvua chal shvua. He's already bound as being part of the covenantal community that accepted the yoke of mitzvahs at Mount Sinai to perform the mitzvahs. How in the world could he come and initiate a personal shvua that would counter the original shvua? You can't impose a shvua superimpose a shvua on a pre-existing shvua. Therefore, shvuas are non-starters when it comes to a shvua not to fulfill a mitzvah. And there's a stringency ascribed to shvuas that you don't find by nedarim. Shvuas have relevance. They take effect on not only the physical but also on the abstract, things that are non-physical per se, but rather actions. Ma she'en kain b'nedarim. If you just keep things simple, a person, let us say, swears not to speak. So if he speaks, he's then in violation of his shvuah. If a person says, I am no dare not to speak, and then he speaks, it doesn't take effect, because a neder is not chal, doesn't have effect on something that is that is not substantive or not of substance. So what about our Mishnah? Is our Mishnah not describing a neder? Yes, setting in, taking effect on something that is of an action nature as opposed to a specific object. Rav Yehuda, so Rav Yehuda explains, Be'oimer, our Mishnah is to be understood as follows. He is saying in vow terminology, in neder terminology, Ye'oser pi lediburi. I am prohibiting my mouth. Notice the focus on the object, on something physical. One's mouth is a physical entity. And he says that my mouth shall be restricted with regard to its speech. Yodai l'ma'aseh. My hands are restricted with regard to their production. Raglai lehiluchon. My feet are restricted with regard to their walking. Now, limbs are something that in Hebrew we would say dover sheish bo mamish. It's something of substance. And hence, the Mishnah that says the vow sets in is referring to that phrasing. Daikonami, by careful reading of the Mishnah, you can see a hint to this in the words. Tikotoni, the Mishnah says, Pi midaberi moch. There is, in fact, already a focus on the limb when you read the Mishnah. Pi means my mouth is restricted with regard to speaking with you. Velokotoni, it doesn't say in the Mishnah, she'ani medaberi moch. He doesn't say in the Mishnah, koinim she'ani medaberi moch. That would have been a vow on an action. And of course that would not take effect. But the Mishnah focuses on the limb, and therefore even a neder can take effect. And now, as you can see, we have been zeicha to complete the first parak of Nedarim, and we continue now with the second parak. Before we read the Mishnah of the beginning of the second parak, on the side we have a nosei topic heading, Hanoder shematpis b'dover ha'ozer. Someone attempts to take a vow, and as we've mentioned so many times already, in vowing, in order to formulate a vow, you have to compare the item that you're trying to prohibit to something that was made restricted, that was made prohibited by your having made it such, as opposed to comparing the item that you want to restrict now to an item that was pre-restricted even without your imposing a prohibition. And we'll have very simple examples. So if a person is matpis, that's the concept we just finished describing, b'dover ha'ozer, in something that is pre-restricted, kamo, chazer, lo b'dover ha'noder, and not something that you made prohibited kekorban, like a sacrifice, ein haneder chal. So if you don't operate within the formula of vows, you will not have an effective vow. V'elu mutarim, the Mishnah. The following are mutarim, meaning they're not considered a vow. Don't translate this by the way of saying it's like it's mutter to say these things. We don't want people to be loose in their speech. We don't encourage people just to go ahead and say these things. But what we're interested is, what is the effect of the speech? So if you say the following, you'll discover there is no vow. V'elu mutarin chulin she'ochelach, or keboser chazir. If a person would say that keboser chazir she'ochelach, that which I eat from you, that your food is unto me like pig. Ke'avodas kechavim, like an idol. Ka'oros levuvin. Oros levuvin is an example of an article of idolatry. Without translating, Oros levuvin is discussed at a greater extent in Maseches Avodah Zarah. Kenevelos, ketrefos nevelos is forbidden meat. that comes from an animal that hadn't been slaughtered, or ketrefos, animals that are forbidden to eat because they have a type of let's say organ deficiency. Kishkotsim, kiramosim, these are forbidden creatures in the Torah. Kechalas Aaron, uketrumasa, or you say to a person that your food is unto me like chalas Aaron. That's the dough tithe given from anyone's personal dough, assuming he prepares a dough of a minimum significant amount. And if he says that your food is unto me like truma, like the truma tithe offered to kaihanim, mutter, there is no vow. Person says to his wife, you are unto me like my mother. Now, one's mother is certainly prohibited. For a man, a son cannot cohabit with his mother, and so he says something along those lines. But he says to his wife that you're unto me like my mother, not referring, of course, to her cooking. Peschin lo pesach mimokom acher shelo yakel roishoy lekach. Here we're just going to translate the Mishnah. We have to leave room for a Gemara discussion that revolves around this part of the Mishnah later on. So we say that if a person says to his wife that you are unto me like my mother, so we attempt to release him from such a vow from mimokom acher, resorting to we'll say another realm, in order that he does not treat vows in a light, offhanded fashion. On the side of the Gemara, we have a topic heading, Ma milamedes hamilah chulin she'oichalach b'mishnah. In our Mishnah, we saw the word chulin. A person says chulin, which is permitted food, mundane, common food. That which I will eat from you is unto me like chulin. The Gemara. Taima, the reason that there is no neder, the Amar chulin she'ochalach. The Mishnah said that if a person says chulin she'ochalach, the result of that mutter. Does that not leave room for drawing an inference? Ha'oimer, however, had he said lichulin she'ochalach, mashma, by saying lichulin she'ochalach, it gives us the impression that you're saying lo lichulin leheve elo korban. So again, this is first impressions. If a person were to have said lichulin she'ochalach, that would have taken effect. And why? Because by saying that, you're saying not chulin. Not chulin means chulin is that which is common or mundane. The opposite of that is something sanctified. So not chulin shall be, but rather a korban that shall be unto me that which I eat from you. And the result of that would be also be for prohibited. Moni masnisen. According to whom is our Mishnah? Namely, if a person would say lechulin, so lechulin she'oichalach, that would be a vow. Well, who would say that? Rabbi Meir. If it would be in accordance with Rabbi Meir, it couldn't possibly be, because ha'les le michlal. We continue at the top of Daf Yudalid. He does not hold from the concept of michlal lavat hashomeahin. In order to go from the expression lo, that is lechulin she'oichalach, not chulin shall be that which I will eat from you. So what then is what I would be eating for you? Well, if it's not chulin, but yes, a korban. That's called michlal lav, deriving from the negative to a positive. Because by saying lichulin shalochas, the Gemara said, that sounds as if he's saying, not chulin shall be, but rather, yes, a korban, and therefore, I won't be able to eat from you, because I'm declaring your food unto myself like a korban. That reasoning, or that method of drawing a conclusion, is the method Rabbi Meir does not accept, because that's called Michlal Avat Shemahein. So who is the author of our Mishnah with all that it implies? It can't be Rabbi Meir. So Vela, Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara continues by suggesting our Mishnah would be in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda. If that's the case, but Hainu Reisha. Hainu Reisha means in the first parak we've already learned this. Rashi reminds us of that, and he tells us back on Daf Yud Omid Beis, the Mishnah said Lichulin she'ochalach, and we had a Mishnah that we established was in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore why does it have to be taught again over here? The Gemara answers, Aidi de katani kebasar chazir kavidus kechavim. The Mishnah taught other examples of things where a neder is not chal. So it threw in chulin she'ochalach, lachi katani chulin, but not that we should see the word chulin and then start asking, well, what does this infer? So we're not attempting to draw any inferences from the Mishnah, like we said, like we thought it beforehand. Rather, you see, it says chulin she'ochalach muter. That's all. Not to say, well, had he said ha chulin or had he said lichulin, so it would have been a vow. Ravina Omar Hachi Katani. Ravina has another approach to explaining the Mishnah. V'elu mutaren kechulin. The following are mutter, just like chulin. Meaning, just like if a person were to say chulin, he said nothing, and there's not even a hint of a vow. Meaning, you don't have to seek out the absolution of the vow by going to a sage, a Torah scholar, for heter nedarim, because nothing has gotten off the ground. And what are those phrases? If a person would say in his vowing, kibasar chazir, kavidus kechavim. V'ilo tana chulin. Here the Gemara explains the significance of the word chulin in the Mishnah, because had I not taught that have amina, I would have thought boi she'ela, that if a person were to say that your food is unto me like pig meat, well, you should go to a sage to have it rescinded. In other words, there's some element of a vow there. So by adding to the Mishnah chulin she'ochalach, we're telling you by saying kebasar chazir, it's nothing. You don't have to go to a sage to seek the absolution or the reversal of the vow, because there is no vow to begin with. The Gemara raises a question on this explanation. You'll notice that it's a question that lasts 4 lines. Omi ika lasuke al daita hachi. Would you really have thought that? Namely, that without the word chulin, someone who would say kebasar chazir, that your food is unto me like pig meat, you would have had to gone for vow absolution to a chacham. But hami de katani seifa. From the fact that at the end of the Mishnah we see this phenomenon. Hoimer lishta, one says to his wife, we seek absolution for such a vow. That in the opening part of the Mishnah there was no thought of turning to a sage for vow absolution. Ela machvarta chulin memelo naspa. So rather, machvarta means it's more likely like approach number one. Notice on the second line from the top we had written in a number one. The Gemara here is saying go back to that answer, and that the presence of the word chulin really is of no halachic significance. It's just brought in along with the other expressions that show that there is no, the other expressions that represent a non-vow. Mino hani mili. From where do we know that when you formulate a vow, you compare the item to something that was prohibited, that there is no vow? Omar Kro, Ish ki dor neder lashem. Of course, a quote from the pasuk, from which we learn Achi yadur bedavar hanadur, that the vow doesn't take hold unless you parallel the item you're trying to prohibit to something that itself was made prohibited through a vow. Well, ihachi, if that's the way you are, say, approaching the scriptural terminology, the scriptural turn of phrase, well then afilu b'davar asur nami. Then why do you preclude the possibility of comparing something to something that was prohibited as being a non-vow? To haksiv, does it not say le'esor isor al nafsho? And just like you said, ki yidor neder, that turn of phrase yidor neder means that the neder has to be something that was made osir by you. Well, le'esor isor also implies something that was already osir before you made a vow. Something that you're comparing something that was prohibited even without your having made it prohibited, like the horse meat example. The Gemara says, Le'esar Isar, that part of the pasuk, that phrase, Miboya le lechedetanya, I need that for a separate point of information. For that which was taught earlier, back on Daf Yud Beis, and here the Gemara simply quotes a reference to that source without elaborating. Ezu Isar ha'omu b'Torah, so it's needed for that teaching. Rashi, the Ran has an interesting elaboration on this. And if we look at it together, the Ran on the first of the extreme wide lines, the end of line, Misboy l'chedetanya ezu isar lashminan, from which we learn the afagav de toli nidro beneder shaloneser lolavado, that when you are prohibiting something and basing it upon something that was made osir, that was made prohibited only to you alone, a personal prohibition, dainu yom shemez bo aviv, chayol nidra, the neder is effective. The lav high craw, if not for this pasuk of lesser isar, have amina, I would have thought that ki dor neder, that the vow formulation, whereby we say it has to be paralleled to something else that was made osir previously, only if you parallel the item, let's use the example we've been using since the beginning of the Masechta. This kikar, this loaf of bread, is prohibited unto me like, and then you'd have to say like something else that's also to everybody, not just also to me alone. Kamashmal and Kra, the lesser Isser. So the pasuk lesser Isser tells me that even if you parallel the loaf of bread to something that was made usher to you alone, that too is considered a proper vow formulation, an effective vow formulation. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.